Now we have
Ah, there she is.
Connie and Betty. We had Connie with us a few years ago, just prior to the plague. I've had the honor to work with her last May when we did our MPA shoot with her as our Maryland Master. And I really had the privilege to watch her in action, watch her work her process, and how she communicated with her models and how it became a whole interactive process where everybody had a say. And I really enjoyed it. She just had uh, an exhibition down at Maryland or at the American University at the Katzen Museum there that just came down in December. I had the opportunity to go down there and take a look at it, and it is particularly dazzling. If you've seen her work, if you haven't, go to her website, check it out. She has yeah, actually she has a couple of limited edition books of her work available on her site as well too. She's an educator. Uh, she learned photography at MICA, became a teacher at MICA, and now she's still teaching and leading workshops. She's been featured in a number of different art and photography magazines over the years. And with all that, it's all yours, Connie.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, thank you guys for inviting me. I'm really excited to present to you again. Um, so I'm gonna just jump right in, uh, share. And I have been photographing. Well, the show that I recently had was a 50-year retrospective. Um, so I've been at this for quite a while. The show was wonderful because it had some work that I did as a student in MICA when I was 17, all the way up to the present. And it was really an amazing experience to see that much work in one place. Um, but the series that I'm working on now, uh, I actually started in 1986, and it's photographing figures and first in water and working with the reflections and distortions of the water. And then I've moved on to mirrors. So none of the images are manipulated, even though they look like they're manipulated. They are not. So I'll show you how I did this one. It's upside down from the way that I shot it. So in this version here, you can see that this is a reflection on the surface of the stream, and this person is partially submerged in the water. But I found it to be much more powerful when I showed it this way. And since my work is not necessarily so much about recording the world, but more an interpretation of it or an expression of it, I I feel free to turn my images whatever way that it that they need to make them the strongest that they can be. Another note here, I was working with a very large, it was an SLR Rolly, SL66, I think was the name of it. And it was a huge thing, a monster, and I was hand holding it and looking down into it, and the screen was flipped backwards, side to side, right to left. It was flipped. So I'm working with these reflections and I'm seeing everything flipped one way. And so the whole thing was very disorienting, which actually became an important part of my seeing. This was also done in the stream at a place where the sun is hitting the rushing water, creating these specular highlights. It looks like there's messages written in there. It looks like fires, something kinetic, energy. And this is working in a kiddie pool that was about 6 inches deep, and it had all kinds of horrible cartoons printed on it. So I covered the cartoons with a black cloth, and that made the reflection pop out as clear as if it was a mirror. And this led me to stuff I'm still working on today. So it was shot this way. You can see the line of the water. Um, but I find it much stronger this way. What this showed me was that I have the body under the water here, which is much softer and diffused. The face outside of the water, and then the reflection of this face. And so I had three distinct layers that I was working with. And that it could, in some combination or another, those layers have been what I've been looking at for the last 45 years. Intuition takes us to the edge of what we know, and more importantly, to the edge of what we don't know. Intuition is a very important part of my process. And I learned this early on working with that heavy camera with the image flipped and looking at reflections basically upside down. And I learned to let go of what I knew I was seeing, and I had to see what was actually there. And that forced me to stop thinking about what the image was that I was making and just follow my eyes. Just let my eyes lead me. And I find that this is such an important concept that intuition, the source of intuition, is from an unconscious place, whether it's a personal unconscious or a collective unconscious. Um, but it takes us, the process of intuition takes us beyond what we know. So I've always felt that if I thought of an image and went out and made it, then I'm really staying within my comfort zone. I'm staying within what I already know. But if I push myself beyond that, and let go of what I know things to be and really follow my eyes, it becomes much more interesting. We all know what tuition is. It's paying for learning. Intuition is knowledge from within. So the Greek base tuere is knowledge or learning. And so I find it very interesting that intuition then is originally thought of as looking inward for knowledge. This is done in a hot tub, and I'm working with the reflections on the surface of the water. This also was very important because I was um, understanding how important it was to line up the reflections with the real. And in that way, having two layers put together in a different way was enabling me to create something completely different. So working with the layers is very important to the process that I'm working on. This is still in a hot tub, and this is where um, working uh, so I'm above camera here, above the water. I'm shooting in a hot tub, and camera angle becomes absolutely critical. And all of these images, layering things together, camera angle is critical. But it's so interesting in the water because you can see here that what's under the water has become thin and stretched out. But what's above the water, the hand and the toes, are in a whole different scale. So with this ability to exaggerate different parts of the body, it it's similar to what the Italian Renaissance mannerists would do. The most famous was David, whose arm is elongated in proportion to his body, not so much that it looks awkward, but just enough so that you really can feel the strength. So this is the same situation, but I've changed the camera angle here. And now you see what's under the body has become, under the water has become magnified, and what's above has become much smaller in scale. So it's interesting. It's all about the distortions that happens with water and really paying attention. That was the thing that I learned the most about shooting with water was how important it was to really see through the camera and let my thoughts go as much as possible. In 1990, I started working in a studio with a mirror. In this case, I'm going to show you. I tried to figure out how to show you how I do this. So I came up with this little graphic. So this is me over here. I couldn't find a real photographer, so I got myself with a hard hat and gave myself a little camera here. You see the back of the camera. This is one model here who's reflected where there's reflective material. And here's the other model who's showing through where I've taken off the reflective material and it's clear. So in this way, I can light this one very different than I light this one because they're in two very different places. And so you see, I'm combining the reflection of this person with this person showing through. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them. I'd like this to be informal as we can. So this is done with that technique. Two people. This one is behind the mirror, and this one is reflected on the front. And I've lined them up so it looks like they've matched up, but a little off. And I always found that in that process where things are a little off, that's where the opportunity for poetry or significance is. This is also done with that technique. The arm is from another model showing through, and this model is reflected on the front. And you can see that I can do the same thing here that I was doing in the water. I can exaggerate this arm so it looks much larger in scale on this body. Again, exaggerating the posture, exaggerating the gesture, very much like the late Italian Renaissance mannerists. In scraping off the backing of the mirror, I found these really interesting ways of making these marks. And I've always envied painters who could make the mark part of the expression. And so I started becoming really fascinated with the texture on the mirror itself. These are two models who are separate by the mirror. And I think of this as a dance, like a dance with oneself. It could be a dance with the devil. There's something ominous. And I think that one of the things that this scratched mirror effect has given me is a feeling of old etchings or an old printmaker's process. So it kind of puts us in the frame of mind of looking at images that are reminiscent more of perhaps mythology. And I see this image as having a mythological basis to it. This figure is hovering over this figure while she sleeps. And that's the myth of Cupid and Psyche, where Psyche is leaning over Cupid. She wants to see what he looks like and wakes him up, and then all kinds of horrible things happen. If you really want to know the myth, look it up. And so I found that these mirror images really took me to some dark places. I was following the images and following my my intuitive process. And one thing about the intuitive process is it can take you to some very dark places. But I think it's just as important to look at these dark places as it is to look at the light and the joy. So I found myself in some very dark places here. This is one of the most difficult images I've ever made. To me, he looks like Hitler. He looks like he's psychotic to the point where he can't trust his own feelings or his own senses, that are telling him where he is. He can't trust that. Plato said, everything that deceives may be said to enchant. So after the darkness of the mirror work, I went back to working with water. This time I'm working in a hot tub and I'm working at night. So what's above the water doesn't show. I'm working with an underwater light that I put under the water. So only the part of the body that is under the water is showing. The rest of her up here will be her head, the rest of her arm, her back. That doesn't show because it's out of the water. And so I'm using the line of the water here as a way to really reform the body. And this was really a joyous um, experience coming out of the darkness of the mirror images and coming into this, really looking at the body for the beauty of the body. And it was a really exciting time and understanding how I can look at the body in different ways. So here, this is her arm, and it's just touching in the water. Her hand is out of the water. This is the line of the water, and this is her other arm, just touching in the water. You can see her leg is coming out of the water, and this is the line of the water here, and it ends in this wonderful point. You can see the water is going right around her ankle bone. So it's redefining the body or reforming the body or looking at the body in a new way.
How are you supporting the body?
That's a very good question. Um, I I have made different things so that the models can rest themselves on it, like planks going across the hot tub. I've also had assistants who would help hold the body. Um, and like this one, I believe that the model was being held by a couple of people who were holding her. So we get her in this position, and then everybody has to hold still for the water to still, so we don't
Right.
get any movements. So it probably looked, I know it looked absolutely ridiculous if you came along and saw this shoot. Um, but the result was very satisfying to me. And then I decided I wanted to go underwater. I had been loving what was happening, the three layers um, that I first pointed out, the reflection, the real, and the underwater. And I started wanting to do that from under the water. So I got an underwater camera, and I know you all were talking about underwater cameras. The best underwater camera ever made was the Nikonis RS. It was a single lens reflex. It had interchangeable lenses, and it was a 35 millimeter camera. And it looked like a big 35 millimeter camera. It was no housing. It was brilliant. I loved this camera. Um, so what's happening here? This is the part of the body that's underwater. This is the line of the water here. This is her hand that's dipping into the water. The line of the water is going like this. And this is a reflection of this. So it's a total illusion that this hand is coming out of or going into the chest of this person. If you have questions, just shout them out. I might start asking questions. How's that? I'm a teacher. Never mind. Okay, so this is also underwater. This is the part, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. This is the part of the body that's underwater. So it's interesting if you're shooting underwater to underwater, there's no distortion. If you're shooting underwater to above water, there is distortion, and vice versa. So it's shooting through the layer of water. This is a reflection of this. With this one, the model has her mouth open and the water is going right through her mouth. So this is a reflection of this. And this is a reflection. What's above the water doesn't show because I have no lights on it. this is a dentist who started collecting my work and wanted me to photograph her. And so I started looking at her teeth. She had great teeth. And that's her tongue. And it's a normal tongue. But you can probably figure this out by now. This is the line of the water. This is underwater. And this is all reflection of this. To get these reflections, you have to be perfectly still. So I take a deep breath. I go under the water. I have weight belts to keep me down. The models get in position. We wait for the water to still, and then I start working. For this one, his face is partially submerged underwater. This is the part of his face that's out of the water. This is the line of the water here. This person here is another person who's deeper in the water, and this is his reflection on the surface of the water. And one thing I found really fascinating underwater was the surface tension of the water, the meniscus that is the edge of the water is much more pronounced under the water than it is above. So next time you have a water glass, a clear water glass, look at it from underneath and see if you can see that meniscus. I've loved playing with it. Here it looks like molten metal of some kind. And I look at this image and I see that he is either breathing in the soul of this person or he's exhaling his soul. So now I'm back to the studio, back to mirrors. And now I'm working with broken mirrors. These are all plastic mirrors. So I break the mirrors in various ways, and I actually have a video on my website to show you how to break the mirrors if you want to know. It's kind of a spoof, but that's okay. So I get these beautiful long shards, and I tape them on top of the mirror where I've taken a lot of the backing off, and it's this very rough material. So I've taped this on, and using the shape of the shard to reform the body, to exaggerate that gesture of the arms, the arm going up, the hand coming out, using this shape of the shard to exaggerate the gesture. And again, it's coming back to the same idea of the mannerist, using some kind of technique or another to magnify, to exaggerate, or to pull attention to one aspect of the body. Same thing here. I have I have this long shard here. And then you can see this is a shorter shard, but you can see the shape of it there. And I've taped them on the mirror. And again, like defining the gesture almost here. And as I said before, the mirror images often go to dark places. And I see this as a kind of torture. This was before the horrible situation at the American prison camp, Abu Ghraib, and the horrible pictures that came out of that. But in hindsight, I see this as resembling that in a sort of psychological way. And the same idea here. It's defining the gesture that he's making. It's more than defining, it's exaggerating it. It's really drawing attention to it. And these are two people here, one in front of and one behind. And I've lined it up so that their bodies go together. And I often think of this one as like a dance with oneself, like dancing with the other side of yourself, maybe the negative side or the side that we like to hide from. And I'm going to read you this poem by William Stafford. it's called The Way It Is. And I find this poem to be very reflective of my journey over these last 50 years. There's a thread that you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread. But it is hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do can stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. And I feel that, especially it was so confirmed looking at the 50-year retrospective, that there are threads that run through my work that started when I was the student at Micah at 17. It was very clear to see the threads that have run through the work and continue to run through the work. So I found that poem to be very enlightening for me. So this is the same technique as before, only the part of the body that's in the water is illuminated because I have an underwater light in the water. So you can see this is his thigh. It's just touching in the water here and around to his chest, which is just touching in, coming around to the forearm and the fully articulated hand. And I see this, this material here looks like ether, looks vaporous. It's not solid. So in a metaphoric way, I see this as being born out of the ether, becoming a full being through the vaporous materials. 2008, I hit the wall that many photographers my age hit. We had a real tragedy amongst us when they stopped making our film and our paper and everything was digital, and I was teaching at the time, and my students were talking about a language I didn't understand with JPEGs and TIFFs and all this stuff. And I had always thought of myself as a black and white photographer. And at that point, I considered myself a master printer. And so I finally become a master printer. And then along comes this new confounded thing that's going to replace me. And so many photographers have gone through this that are my age. I'm sure some of you went through it. So I got an underwater camera and a housing, and I went underwater. And because you don't make the decision about black and white or color until later with a digital camera, I started looking at it in color, and I never saw this in all the years of working underwater. I never saw that underwater, the body is very cool because the water absorbs the warm tones. So above the water, you have the full range of colors, but underwater, you have this coolness. So this is another way of looking at the two layers, but this time through color. In this one, I'm underwater. He's underwater. This is his reflection on the surface of the water. I find this really interesting because as I look at him, he's very intent on this person. Looking at it, looking at him, attending to him, reaching towards him. But this person is very much into their own thing and really doesn't have any concern or care for this other person, which really is the myth of Narcissus. And I think of this image as an illustration of that myth. I didn't set out to make an illustration of Narcissus, but when I saw it, I recognized it. I see this is a flame coming out. We've got the underwater with the coolness and then the reflection above the water. So now we've gone back to the studio, working with the mirrors, the partially desilvered mirrors. And working with lighting the models, because they're on either side of the mirror, I can light them very differently. So I lit one model with a bright red filter or gel over the light. And so you can see the redness here. And she is reflected on the front. And so I can combine these figures in, in some interesting ways. And using color as a way to separate the forms is fascinating to me. As a trained black and white photographer, and then you give me another tool like color, I'm really fascinated by it. I didn't think I would be, but I am. So this is the model behind and the hands reaching up. And I see this as the hands reaching up to pull the psyche, to separate the psyche from the body, like a depression pulling the psyche out of the body. The psychic energy is pulled. This is also the same technique with the red model behind and this one reflected on the front, and lining it up so that they are pretty lined up pretty well. And I see his hand here is like it's a fist coming through where his heart would be. And I see this as the myth of Oedipus. The short version of Oedipus is that he married his mother, he killed his father, and then he poked out his eyes with rusty nails. He was so ashamed. Researchers have shown that there are all sorts of ways in which the conscious mind is not only influenced by the unconscious, but actually guided by it. And I'm a fan of Carl Jung. When I read this, it makes sense to my ideas of intuition. When I'm working very intuitively, I'm not in control. I do often feel like this is not my work, that it's come through me. Many artists have talked about that, and I'm sure many of you have experienced it, where you look at one of the most striking images you've ever made, and secretly in your heart you say, but it was an accident, or I didn't mean to do that. But it's from that intuitive place, and it's yours, and you did all the work to get there. So you have a right to claim it.
When you
Yeah.
when you're taking a shot like this, um, are you giving the person instructions like close your eyes or open your eyes? I mean,
It's
you're,
a
you're directing them, is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, to some extent. Um, when I start a shoot, I have a starting point, but the important thing is to let go of that starting point
Right,
because I
because
want,
something changes and you say, wait a minute, do this.
yes,
Okay.
and sometimes I ask them just to start moving and I'm looking and I start seeing something. The important thing to me is to be reactive. Um, not planning and taking a picture of, but reacting to all of the visual things that are going on. And if you can imagine that what I'm looking at is chaotic, it's truly chaotic. I've got this one large mirror. I've got these shards of mirrors. I have, in this case, it's a mannequin behind and a reflection on the surface of this. So there's a lot of stuff going on. And then it becomes my job to make sense of that, to organize that. But because I'm not bound to record this world, record this reality, I can let go and restructure things in a new way. And that's where it gets exciting. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Do they ever come with a preconceived idea what they want to would look like?
I work very closely with my models. And the one model here, um, actually it's not him, but one model I've worked with for 22 years. And I tend to work with my models for a long time. So we really get to know each other. We talk about the work a lot, and they're very much a part of the process. So if they have an idea, yeah, we do it. We start with it and see
Okay.
where it goes. Yeah. So you can see how the shape of these shards starts to really dictate the form. Um, this shape here, and uh, this fellow reminds me of of like a ghost of a warrior whose armor is ruined and his body is falling apart, but he still stands, um, aware of his duty, unwilling to let go of his job as a sentinel. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that's one thing that this process, this creative process, has really forced me to do is to be true to the creative process and the intuitive process. I really have had to go where it leads me and look into some of these very dark places. I think these dark places are places we all know, we've all experienced at some time or another. One thing I love to do is to put lines and shapes together. And so the point here really excited me. Uh, and the way that some of this stuff fits together, I found very exciting. So I go back and forth between making images that can be very psychological, and then images that are much more formal. Uh, and this one obviously is a more formal image, as is this one. This one, um, I I love this illusion of these forms twisting through one another, and it's a complete illusion. Um, they this is not coming out and through this, but lining it up so that it looks that way was a discovery that was very exciting for me. Once I discovered that, um, the idea of that illusion, then I really worked with it to begin to understand um, how to make it um, how to make it really work as an illusion. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Nietzsche. Um, I think that one of the most important parts of my process is letting go of what I think things are, of allowing myself to just see the forms, to look at the chaos and start to put things together again in a new way. It goes back to those early images where I was handling that big hulky camera, looking at reflections upside down. That camera flip things right to left. And it was so disorienting that I really had to let go of what was actually there so that I could look at the forms that I was seeing in front of my camera. So this is working with a mannequin, and I lit the mannequin very bright, and then the other model is lit with very cool lights. This is an African American model. This is working with different shards, the shape of different shards. And I was recently asked how I made this image, and I started to dissect it, and I wasn't really sure how I made it. Um, it's very complex. It doesn't look complex, but it's very complex how the shapes merge with each other and mimic each other. So here I realized that I was working with the reflection on the shards and then this sort of ghosting of another reflection, which is on the plexi, and then the figure from behind. Again, it's all these layers that's happening. 2020 came, and my process for years and years has been to shoot every week. I have a standing appointment with my models, and it's very important for me to keep that um, those meetings going and to keep that process uh, moving like that, because I feel like I tune my eyes, and if I go too long without shooting, then my eyes get it's like a it's like a musician who doesn't practice. He gets rusty. And if I don't see, if I'm not shooting, my eyes get rusty. So this was 2020, and the world fell apart, as we all know. Um, so I made a couple of images in 2020. This is the model who has been my assistant for 24 years, model for 22 years. And we decided to try a couple of shoots during COVID. So he's wearing a mask and we have the plastic between us. Um, it was a very difficult time for everybody. I've referred to dances a couple of times um, in the sequence of these images, and I see this as a kind of dance, but it's more like a melding together of the forms. This is another illusion of the forms twisting together, the limbs twisting together. So when I'm shooting like this person is on the rear side of the mirror, of the plastic, and this person's on the front. I forgot to mention, somewhere along the line here, I started working with clear plastic instead of um, instead of mirrors. So the reflections now are all on the clear plastic. So you can imagine my exposures are crazy because it has to be very bright on this model in order to get any kind of reflection on just a clear piece of plexi. And then this model on the other side, I have to balance the light so that there is a relationship between the two. And I'm not sure I could have done this with film, but this incredible latitude we have with these sensors is it's astounding to me. The important thing for me when I'm working like this is to pay attention to the shadows. It's light and shadow has been just about everything to my work, along with the layers. And this is the shadow. This figure here, this is his back. This is a shadow created from one of his wings. So this went into shadow. And I lined it up so that her face fit into that shadow. And then her arms and their arms started to circle one another. And to me, this has the feeling of a Madonna. Here I've lit the model behind with a very extreme light. So it's an extreme rim lighting. And I have her in a much more full lighting, and obviously in very different scales. I've lit him so that you see the edge of his body, you see the skin here, but there's enough of his skin to feel like an overlay or a sac of some kind, an embryonic sac. And what I find interesting here is that these are fingers, but this is an arm. This is the forearm or the upper arm, and this is the forearm. And so you can see the scale is really different. And this reminds me of an embryo. The same idea here, very extreme lighting. and fitting one form inside the other. But if I do it exact, if I line them up exact, it's okay, but it doesn't go anywhere. But when I have things off, uh, just off enough, then there's that element of surprise that comes in that makes the whole thing interesting. So I started putting an extreme light on the model in the front and lining the two of them up together. So we're up to 2023. This is blending the two figures together, really with using shadow and highlights and tucking the one figure in where the shadows are. Now we're up to 2024. I started the year with working with a cloth, and I had one model pull the cloth very tight across his face and across his shoulder and down his arm, and then lined it up so it looks like this is a mask of some kind. Masks have been something that has been in my work, throughout my work, for ever since the beginning. I'm really fascinated with the idea of putting a different face on. This one is, it's pretty strange. It's a combination of the two people, one on one side of the mirror, one on the other. And I don't really know how this eye came to be so strange and transparent. I feel like that's a little gift. So this is one model with the cloth, but I'm lining it up so that he's coming from the shadow of the other. So it looks like this material or this form is coming out from the middle of him. So we're coming up to my latest work. And I was telling Mike before we started this that a lot of times breakthroughs happen with accidents or when you just get fed up with something and try something else. And I've been shooting with long lenses so that I stay out of the reflection. Um, and I'm in my 70s and my hands are 70 years old. My wrists are my back. And I've been a photographer for over 50 years. So, I've done some wear and tear on my body, just being a photographer. So with these long lenses, I've tried different ways. I like to handhold because lining things up is so critical. So I've tried a chest pod and that works a little bit. I've tried a unipod. It's still too much. And one day I was just so frustrated with it, with this long lens and not being able to handhold. I just said, oh, the hell with it. And I changed lenses. I said, I'm going to put on the smallest, lightest weight lens that I have. And so I did. So I went from like I don't know, a 150 or a 135 to a 50. And of course, I got a lot more of the environment in. And I was planning on cropping it out. But when I saw this image, I was floored. I've never used an environment to have the environment be such an important part of the statement. And so when I saw this, and this is all the stuff that's just hanging around in my studio that I can't even explain what things are. This is a bench, poles. This is stuff on the mirror on the plastic where I've scratched it. But it starts to become this dungeon or this really creepy basement with this very strange light coming in. Indeed, the special significance of a true work of art resides in the fact that it has escaped the limitations of the personal and has soared beyond personal concerns of the creator. And this is what I was saying earlier, that sometimes it's an accident that leads me on, or switching lenses because I'm so frustrated. that leads me on. But the important thing is to let that happen, to allow that to happen. And here's another one. So this is light that's just glinting off of stuff in my studio. These are marks that I've made on the plexi. And so it has created this again in this sort of dungeon type place. It's created this sense of being in a very dark, disturbing place. And this is the last image I'm going to show you. This is a pretty recent one, where I'm putting the figures together and using a lot of the marks on the plastic to create an effect, if you will. So that is me. I'm going to stop sharing.
Was that a zipper in that last?
You know what that was? I took a drill and I put a drill bit on it and I ran it across the plastic. It was probably a really dangerous and stupid thing to do, but it was fun. Okay. So I'd love to answer questions.
Transfixed and mesmerized here. So that is we have quite a body of work, Connie.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you are interested. Oh, Rod, you got your little puppy there.
There's my little boy. That's Mojito.
Mojito. That's a
Yeah.
that's a good name. I like that.
Yeah, for Havanese. Yeah, yeah. Your work is totally astounding and mind blowing to me. I've never seen any work like that in years. Even in New York where I lived, all the artists and things like that. I've never seen such creative work, Connie, and my mind is just blown right now as to how would I even go about creating an image like that? I kind of, listened to everything you said about the water and the hot tub and the balance and shooting below and above. And, the way you've combined these images is spectacular. And I don't know that I would ever be able to reproduce or get an image like that. So kudos.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means so much to me. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Very welcome. Well deserved.
Taking the art form to the outer limits.
It's really fantastic work. I'm so impressed. Do you have any suggestions for us who are not really artists to how to kind of loosen up and experiment more?
Yes, I would say get out of your head and into your eyes. Joseph Campbell said, the eyes are the scout of the heart. And I believe that to be true. If we bypass our brain, which filters all kinds of things out, but if we just start responding to what we're seeing out there, we're letting our eyes lead. And that's a direct connection to the intuitive process. And once we're shooting intuitively, we have to be true to it. Because it's sometimes pretty rough, but it's always fascinating. That's where the real magic happens.
Okay. I know we've been exposed to other photographers who've been showing us things like ICM or abstract photography or things like that, where it's a little easier, I think, to kind of start off, but usually the result looks nothing like their work. So it's a very difficult thing to make that jump or even attempt to make that jump, but I'll try.
So when I was looking at the show, the 50-year retrospective, I said to myself, this is 50 years of baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
there was no one big leap. It was all baby steps. And with everything that implies falling down, screaming, yelling, um, but getting back up and
Yeah.
eventually enjoying myself. Doesn't happen overnight. But here's the other thing. So the end of the year, I like to do kind of an evaluation of the year. In 2024, I had 24 shoots. I shoot like 500 to 600 images in each shoot. So I had tens of thousands of images. And you look at the wall behind me, and those are the keepers from that year.
Wow.
So you have to fall in love with the process. You have to love the learning of it, the excitement of seeing. But think of what brought us to photography in the first place. It's one thing I always loved about teaching basic photography was seeing the students' eyes just like go boing with excitement when they saw how cool photography was. And if we can remember that and keep that in a little piece of us, it's
Great place.
it's easier to love the process.
Yeah.
I have to say, having the privilege to actually see you work in progress, in your collaboration with your models, and the whole process of how you go through that. It is quite a collaborative process. Everybody seems to know which direction you're going to go, and everybody, you go through all the images on the wall, before you start. Which direction are we going to go? And you go upstairs, you do the job, you come back down and review all the shots you just took at that moment before you go back up and do it some more.
Yeah,
It's quite a process.
it is. And the reason I started shooting that way, which is really, I think, an asset. So I shoot for 15, 20 minutes, upload to the computer, and we all talk about the models and I talk about what's working, what isn't, what, directions to go in. The reason I started doing that was I couldn't handle my camera for longer than 20 minutes at a time.
Sure.
So I would, take a break. We'd look at them. I recovered enough to go back up and shoot another 20 minutes. And we can do that for 3 or 4 hours. And it actually works out better because we're getting that feedback.
Mhm.
If I was doing this in analog, that would be months
Well, it does
worth
really
of
help,
work.
in the direction of your process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
I would love to see. your- I think it'd be real interesting to see you in progress of doing that, because it's not just you're taking a picture of a person.
Mhm.
You're you've got all these elements that's making the picture.
I,
You know,
I I recommend you look at the video
yeah,
that Mike did. Mike and
okay.
the group
I've got some
did.
of
It's a
that in there too.
brilliant video.
It's a pretty dark environment.
It is.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I haven't killed myself up there yet.
I try to do a three-camera shoot up there, and everything is so dark that it's. They think,
Are
oh,
you in the Baltimore area, Connie, or
I am. I'm
where are
in
you?
Towson. I live in
Oh, you're
Towson.
in. Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. That's amazing. I agree with Al. I mean, it would be so exciting to watch you go through this process of a shoot and just be a fly on the wall and, experience some of that. I'm more of a on the job kind of visual,
Right.
Yeah.
learner.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
that's amazing, amazing work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just so abstract to me. I could see these images in any gallery in New York, high end. I
I
mean, just
say that
beautiful.
the show she had there at the American University was well curated. It
Yeah.
was,
It was.
yeah.
It was.
Wow. Jeez. Hopefully they're paying you well, Connie.
Uh, uh,
Yeah.
Oh, so you get paid like a photographer. I get it.
Any
no,
artist.
even worse, like an artist. Even worse.
Yeah. That's funny.
Life is a starving artist.
Oh My God. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for inviting me. I enjoyed seeing your names and your faces.
It was truly a pleasure for us.
Thank you.